Okay, as I said before, I really believe that this year, in order for my students to feel that I am a learner alongside them, that it's really important that I practice the same process of writing and reading as I'm asking them to do. So I've prepared something slightly different than just the vision and my unit, and I'm going to present it to you now. It's a little personal, so if I get a little shaky, even though I feel a lot of trust in this room, don't worry about me, okay?
Dan, can you remind us what you teach?
Yep, I absolutely can. I teach 7th grade ELA. I'm a member of the Richmond Corps, but I teach at Portola Middle School, which actually just got a new name, but Portola Middle School in El Cerrito. This, I believe. I believe that our students are the sense makers and the change makers we need to ensure the just and democratic future of our nation and this world. They will leverage not only their skill as readers, writers, thinkers, and speakers to take ownership of their own story and the future of their community, but also their love of craft, of process and production, to build relationships and live lives filled with opportunity and joy. I believe that English language arts, reading, writing, thinking, speaking, provide a unique opportunity for students to better understand themselves. I believe that building an identity as a reader, starting and nurturing a relationship with reading, will change the way my students engage with the world. It will allow them to see themselves more clearly, to understand their struggles, and to see alternative futures. I believe that students will learn to read so that they can, I believe that students will learn to read so that they can read to learn, and learn to make change where change has been resisted. I believe that growing as readers will in itself create new pathways of opportunity for my students. It will challenge them to face their areas of growth. It will reward them with unseen places and a desire to explore beyond their physical boundaries. I believe that readers make the world around them a better place through sharing what they learn and what they collect between the covers of a book. They seek to create that same power, same justice, same love, same peace, same comfort, same discomfort in the world around them. Because of this, I will create a reading problem in my classroom and in my school. And by this I mean that students will walk down the halls, independent reading book in hand. They will wait outside classrooms, noses in books. They will get in trouble with me and with other teachers for having their independent reading books hiding open to that next page under their desk when they're supposed to be prepping for their vocabulary quiz or listening to a lecture on polynomials. Sorry, man. They will share book recommendations with one another, and they will ache to share their latest read with me, seeing every reader as a peer regardless of age. To do this, not only do I commit to knowing and informing my students of their own reading levels, to ensure that they have the books that are appropriate for them, and to allow them to unlock their connection with literacy, but also do I commit to re-diagnosing my students at the middle of the year and again at the end of the year using the Gates-McGinnity and publicly sharing their growth with the school. I commit to setting audacious reading goals, at least 2 years of reading growth, 40 independent reading books, and aspiring to those goals in my own reading. I commit to setting aside at least 30 minutes of independent reading each day in my 90-minute ELA block and reading alongside my students during this time. I commit to helping each student search out and identify their favorite genres and authors. I commit to building out my independent reading library regularly, adding at least 30 books a month, and soliciting the suggestions of my students when it comes to adding to our collection. I believe that we have the right to our own stories in the same way that we have the right to our own bodies. I believe that no one knows your age on the page. I only know your experience and the way you choose to tell it. I believe that your best voice can be written and shared with the world. I believe that words committed to ink have the ability to make change more effectively than violence and hate. I believe that an informed and researched opinion gives a doubter, or a hater, pause. I believe that we write to be heard, we write to share what's hidden, we write to make change in the world. Because I believe that the strongest writers, storytellers, analyzers, opinion crafters are actually the most heard, I will provide my students with constant opportunities to write. I commit to ensuring that every student publishes at least one piece of writing per quarter. I commit to seeking out and connecting my students to opportunities like RISE, Raw Talent, 826 Valencia, Inkstains, Scholastic Writing Contests, to be published and identify themselves as writers. Because I believe we must see writing and reading as connected, I commit to building every unit with a writing component that builds and references the reading we are doing. I commit to students attaining a 3 out of 4 on the SBAC writing rubric for narrative, informative, and argumentative writing, as each is related, and, in fact, the best informative and argumentative writing is built on the foundation of a strong narrative. Note this piece of writing. Because I believe what students do with language is more important than knowing the rules, I commit to students learning writing through reading rather than rote memorization of terms. I commit to building space each week for creative writing, perhaps an IR or creative writing option on Fridays. I commit to one process and one summative piece of writing during every unit, and I commit to embedding our writing into our reading. I commit to practicing the art of writing myself, again, see this, and journaling once a week at the very least, as well as keeping up with my blog. I believe in Common Core as democracy. I believe that by diving into text and deeply analyzing authors' craft, comparing and contrasting different media and points of view, we are building the critical citizens that our nation needs to ensure a more just future. I believe that there is an inherent joy in discovering meaning in text, that this endeavor builds character and community because it requires us to own what we do know and what we do not. Our inherent and insatiable curiosity spurs us to turn to each other so that we can discover the hidden pieces that buzz with personal significance just below the surface. I believe that we can learn as much from our listening to our peers as we can from listening to our elders, as we can from reading the lessons in a book, an article, or a sermon. I believe that the skill and awareness to ask for help, to provide it, to share our opinions, and to challenge each other to be the best thinkers and humans is a learned skill that must be cultivated in middle school, these essential bridge years. I believe that others in the world judge us by how we speak and how we conduct ourselves when we're faced with intellectual opposition. Because I believe that critical thinking and speaking are essential to long-term success and happiness, I commit to setting goals for my students both as critical analyzers of text, a 3 out of 4 on the TFA ELA Bay rubric, and speakers and listeners, 3 out of 4 on the TFA Bay Humanities rubric. I commit to building systems, think, pair, shares, turn-in talks, small group discussions, Socratic seminars that ensure that my classroom is student-centered and that my students are seeking to learn from each other rather than only me. I commit to participating in Dale's Student-Centered Learning Discussions PLC and videotaping our seminar discussions, not only to share with my colleagues and learn from myself, but also for my students and I to watch, to watch together and grow from our shared experience. I commit to a final speaking project in the spring in which my students record or live perform their presentations for others about a topic or passion of their choice that is sparked by our studies together. I commit to facilitating discussion rather than being a purveyor of personal opinion. In order to do this, I will set a speaking and listening goal, as well as a critical analysis goal for reading and writing for every unit that I teach, because our ability to share our thoughts verbally, to be discerning of our own voice in this world, is just as important as our ability to read and write. I believe that Richmond and El Cerrito is truly a city of pride and purpose. It is, as the 8x11 page above Courtney Gennard's desk reads, like a blossoming flower that can be watered or left to dry up. I believe that there is power and conviction in organizations like BBK, like Cisco, like RISE and their partners. I am linking arms with giants in this collective effort for equity and justice. I have words, I'm just struggling. I believe that Richmond's history of opportunity should not be forgotten, heathered by the spin cycle of generations quickly growing further from their original promise of prosperity that brought families to this city. I believe that the people of Richmond see the beauty and potential in their youth, as evidenced by the programs that rise and the videos and spoken words of the performers and poets of raw talent. Because of this, I will never let myself feel that I am alone in this work. As a writer myself, I will attend open mic events at RISE. I will commit to learning more about the organizations and partners at RISE, as well as the Boys and Girls Club. I commit to connecting my students to these groups, and I commit to supporting them myself through my presence at events and fundraisers. I commit to living in Richmond, to being physically in the community in which I teach. I commit to incorporating community issues and conflicts into my curriculum. My first unit on identity calls upon students to consider what makes up who they are, place being central to this aspect. I commit to learning more about Richmond. I realize that I am still incredibly limited despite my emotions. in the knowledge of my city, and I know that my students offer a unique and firsthand knowledge that I do not have. I believe that my students, that all of our ELA students across the Bay and this nation are sense makers, not troublemakers. They are the change makers in our community and our nation. I believe that they possess power beyond my own. I believe that it's my role to lift up their voices and their confidence so that they can own their story and choose to share it with the world. Because of this, I commit to creating a classroom environment where students feel safe to be themselves, but also aware of the injustices in our community and nation, and feel urgency to fight these injustices. Because of this, I commit to being honest about my students' reading levels so that they have the information they need to make the change they must in order to realize their potential. I commit to constantly soliciting feedback from my students through surveys and close relationships to ensure that my classroom is the learning environment it must be to foster their growth and learning. I commit to starting the year with partner rows that my students can get used to gaining and soliciting knowledge from one another. I commit to videotaping myself weekly as part of that video PLC I mentioned, and measuring teacher talk to student talk to ensure that I am constantly increasing the ratio of students to teachers. I believe that I cannot do this work without parents. It takes a village to raise a child. At least that was certainly true for me and my sister. While I have experienced all the privileges of my white middle-class upbringing, I recognize that this is a very, very limited perspective on the world. My archetype of success has been myopic. I believe that in order for my classroom to be truly responsive and true to my students, I must both be upfront with my parents of my intentions and hopes for their students, but also spend the bulk of my time listening to what they value, what their dreams are for their kids, the wisdom and knowledge that I simply do not have yet. Because of this, I must build relationships with the parents and families of my students. I commit to calling 5 homes a night in my first 5 weeks, as well as attending all the home football games in order to meet parents. I commit to learning from other teachers, those my kids have had in the past, as well as those their siblings have had, in order to learn who I should reach out to ASAP in order to build the strongest relationships. I commit to putting on sneak peek events for each unit and inviting parents to come and learn about what we are learning about in class. I commit to finding from their priorities, personally as well as for their children, what I might best do to serve the larger community. I believe that I must be a learner alongside my students. A learner is one of my key strengths, according to the Strengths Finder, and I know that I must nurture this strength in my time in the classroom. I believe that teaching well is an art form. It is a combination of pedagogy and responsive curriculum, of bets made in plans, moves made in execution. I believe that I can always improve regardless of whatever obstacles I feel stand in my way. To this end, I believe that we, Richmond Corps, Bay Corps, Team ELA Revolution, must be a collective force that learns and feeds off of each other. I am not used to this sort of interdependence and trust. I have always been stubbornly independent, shirking group work due to mistrust. This was exacerbated at Institute with my teaching cohort. While my co-lab teacher and I were thick as thieves, I trust her with my life, I felt a great distrust towards our math partners. Because of this, I know I must build relationships with my grade level and content colleagues at school. I cannot continue to function this way. If I do not build these relationships early on, I will find it difficult to empathize with them. While my relationships and empathy with and for students is a strength, it also eclipses and erodes those same connections with adults. In order to practice this, I commit to participating in the ELA PLC this first quarter so that I can really hold myself to building relationships, especially across Bay communities, in order to continue to be an active learner, but also to push myself to build relationships I might otherwise avoid. Additionally, in taking the trust equation assessment, I noticed that my greatest area for growth is reliability, and I want to ensure that this is not the case in my classroom or my larger professional life. Currently, I don't have a lot of strategies for growing in this area, with the exception of keeping it on top of mind and perhaps adopting Dale's FlexiFriend template. But I will continue to want to work with Dorian on this throughout the quarter so that I can build consistency, both in my classroom execution and in my professional and personal life outside of the classroom, as I know that these will deeply affect one another. Lastly, I believe that while I am enough, I can always be more. I am always seeking to grow. Because I believe this, I commit to making my students, families, colleagues, community members a part of my story. I commit to feeling ownership over my relationships. This I believe. It was shorter when I didn't